saxophone. And the tenor didn't come into jazz until I think the 1920s. Before that, have we had a little quiet back there? Can't hear. Yeah, the tenor didn't come into jazz until the 1920s. Before that, people were playing E-flat altos and clarinets, trumpet, trombone, and it wasn't until the 1920s this guy named Coleman Hawkins. This is a picture of Coleman Hawkins, born in St. Joseph, Missouri, I think around 1907.
If you want to talk, will you please go outside so we can hear Randy?
Coleman Hawkins, born in St. Joe, went to school in Chicago, and then came back and played around Kansas City. And that's when Mamie Smith, the great blues vocalist, heard him and took him to New York with her. I think Coleman was about 19 years old when we got to New York. Played around New York for a while, and then he joined the great Fletcher Henderson's band. And that's when he really brought the tenor saxophone out in jazz. He was the featured soloist on ballads and swing tunes and everything. He stayed with Fletcher until 1934, and then he got a message from Jack Hilton in London telling him to come over to London and join his band. And this was the time when the Depression was coming in 1934, so Hawk seen opportunity to go to Europe. So he went to Europe, stayed in Europe for about, I think 5 or 6 years, and then when he came back to New York, all these other tenor players were on the scene, Chu Berry and Lester Young and Ben Webster, and everybody thought Hawk had, you know, these cats had surpassed it. And Hawk went into the studio and recorded this tune called Body and Soul, and it became such a hit, you know. And the way he did it, he didn't stake the melody at all. He just came in improvising, and it became, all the younger guys just thought it was one of the greatest solos ever put down, Body and Soul. Hawk had a big band for a minute at the Savoy Ballroom, but this was a period when the bands were, it was too much money to carry a 13-piece band all over around the road, so guys started breaking down and having smaller units. Coleman Hawkins did it too. And he hired some of the young giants that were in New York at the time. He hired Thelonious Monk and Dizzy and Miles Davis and Max Roach. And they did one of the first bebop records called Disorder at the Border. Coleman Hawkins. My folks had this 78. I remember seeing that record, you know. Hawk stayed in New York, and around 1949, he did another monumental record. It was called Picasso, and it was just solo tenor saxophone, no accompaniment, and it just became a masterpiece. He continued playing in New York and playing with all the younger guys. Matter of fact, he was on Max Roach's We Insist, a real revolutionary album that Max did in 1959, which was banned in South Africa, and they banned it over here for a while. But he was the father of the tenor saxophone, Coleman Hawkins. While he was in Europe, this guy came under prominence. His name was Leon Chu Berry. He was from Wheeling, West Virginia, and he came to New York, played with all the bands. But his big break came when he got with Cab Calloway's band, with Dizzy and Bill Hinton, Cozy Cole. And this was a band that Cab Calloway had one of the best bands in the swing, during the swing era. Because Cab could dance and sing and entertain people. People just loved, you know, Cab Calloway in the white suits and beautiful stuff. But Chu Berry stayed with Cab for about, I'd say 5 years, and he got in a car crash and died around, I think it was 1940, he was killed in a car crash. But those 5 years, he made an impression on jazz, and a lot of tenor players tried to copy his style. He really came out of the Coleman Hawkins style with that big sound on the tenor saxophone. Leon Chu Berry, he was so liked by Charlie Parker that Charlie Parker named his first son Leon after Chu Berry. They called him the Brute. This was Ben Webster. He was born in Kansas City. He studied with Bud Johnson, another tenor player, and he joined Lester Young's father's band, along with Lester. They were in a band together. Then he played around Kansas City with Andy Kirkland's Clouds of Joy. He came to New York, played with Cab, Fletcher Henderson, but his break came when he joined Duke Ellington's orchestra with Johnny Hodges and the great Jimmy Blanton on bass. Matter of fact, it was such a period with Duke, they called it the Webster Blanton Band, because that was a period when they did, so many fine selections, and featured Ben Webster on ballads. He was to me, he was the greatest ballad player as far as playing ballads on tenor saxophone. He had that sound about him that it's a big sound, but it was also smooth and beautiful. When he played up-tempo tunes, he kind of was harsh, but on a ballad, he was just something out beautiful. Him and Hawk did an album together in the 50s, which is a masterpiece, he along with Coleman Hawkins. He went to Europe, got tired of all this racism in this country. He went to Europe and spent his last years in Copenhagen, Ben Webster. Lester Willis Young. He was born in Woodville, Mississippi. Played with his father's band. He had a brother named Lee Young, who was a drummer. They all played, with his sisters, they played in the father's band. Lester started off on alto and drums, but he gave the drums up quick because he said whenever they played at a nightclub, all the trumpet players and piano players would leave with the women. And he'd be packing these drums up. He said, man, this shit, man, I gotta give you something else, you know. So he switched to tenor saxophone. He didn't want to pack all that stuff because that is a job right there. I'm always the last one leaving. Lester, his family moved to Minneapolis, and father went on tour to the South, but Lester didn't want to go. He didn't want to go down and face all that racism in the South, so he didn't go on the tour. He went to Kansas City and joined Walter Page Blue Devils, and then he joined Count Basie's band, and that's where he got his prominence at. They came to New York and really turned New York out because they brought that Kansas City swing into New York in the East Coast. They also had another tenor player that played alongside Lester. His name was Herschel Evans, out of Texas. He was the first guy to bring that Texas sound on the tenor, and Illinois Jack Ed and cats later adopted that Texas tenor sound. But Herschel Evans and Lester were featured in Basie band, and they were the first tenor players to have duels. And they would sit on the opposite, they wouldn't sit next to each other, they'd sit on the opposite ends of the sax section, and they would have these battles on tenor saxophone. Lester stayed with Basie, and then he also, matter of fact, during this time, Billie Holiday was with the band, and Billie Holiday gave him the name, the president of the tenor saxophone, and he named her Lady Day. You know, Lester was one of the hipsters of jazz. He brought on a whole lot of hip talk and cool, and whenever he had a gig, he would say, "How does the bread smell? You know, how much money they gonna pay us?" He stayed with Basie, and then he got drafted in the service, and instead of them putting him in a band, him and Joe Jones, they put him out on the field, you know, and Lester didn't like it. He got caught with marijuana and drinking, so they put him in the brig. He had to spend about a year or two in the brig. It gave him a dishonorable discharge. When he got out, he came back to New York, and everybody thought he had lost it, but Lester still had that influence. He was much different from the other tenor players. These other tenor players came out of Coleman Hawkins, and they had a big sound. Lester had a light sound, but it was big, but it was light, and it was more flowing. Whereas these guys played like this, Lester played like that. You know, he just smooth, you know, and he's one of the greatest tenor. He was influential on all of the guys that came after, Gene Ammons and Dexter Gordon, Stan Getz. All the white players loved Lester Young, you know, because he had that just a cool sound. He was cool, you know. He did a movie called Jammin' the Blues. You should check it out. It's one of the greatest jazz clips I ever seen, you know. They had the guys, they would let them play, and then they would have them pantomime. They wouldn't put live performances at that time, you know. He came back to New York and played, and then he did a thing called The Sound of Jazz with all the cats in 1959. Matter of fact, my folks watched this one Sunday, and I sat up there watching with them, and Billie Holiday, Lester. Lester died about a month later, and on the way to the funeral, Billie Holiday was in the car with Leonard Feather, the critic, and she told Leonard Feather that she'd be next, and so she died about 3 months after Lester, same year, 1959. They were so close. They weren't lovers, but they were just musical lovers. Matter of fact, they got an album called Musical Romance with Lester and Billie Holiday. But one of the greatest tenor players ever, still. This guy, his name was Don Wesley Bias. He was out in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and he went to school in Oklahoma, Langston College. There he formed a big band, Don Carlos and his Collegiate Ramblers, that's what he called it. He went to, came out here to the coast, and then he came to New York and joined, he took Lester Young's place with Count Basie's band. I think that's around 1941. He took Lester's place and kept playing around New York with all Charlie Parker. Don Bias was almost a transitional type figure, but not quite. He had the sound of all the swing cats, but he could play the bebop kind of stuff, you know, real fluid on his tenor saxophone. A friend of mine told me that when he was in New York, Don Bias would go to people's gig and cut everybody. He could cut all the tenor players except Coleman Hawkins. That's the cat he couldn't get next to. That was his idol. But Don moved to Europe. He went there with Don Riverin's band in 1946. The band, that was the first band to go to Europe after the war. And Don Bias stayed in Europe. He just felt that it was better to stay there. He stayed there for the rest of his life and recorded, and he stayed in Europe for the rest of his life. But one of the top tenor players, John Coltrane and all the cats, they didn't know nothing about it until they went to Europe. They would go to Europe, and he would sit in with them, and they, oh my goodness, where you been? You know, they would say. But one of the greats of the tenor set, most of these guys I'm talking about were influential tenor players. There was a whole lot more tenor players, but these were the cats I think were some of the most influential on the horn. This guy named Illinois Jacquette. He was born in Broussard, Louisiana, and when he was young, his family moved to Houston, Texas, and he started playing in Houston with Milt Larkin's band, different bands, and then he came to California. Then he joined Lionel Hampton's band. He was 19 years old, and he was playing alto, but Hamp told him to get a tenor saxophone. So he picked up a tenor, and he did a recording called Flying Home. And it just was, it was the beginning of really like rock and roll and rhythm and blues. This guy, he really brought that on. Lester had done something similar, but Lester was more jazzy and hip, you know, was Jacquette was more of a rhythm and blues kind of player, you know, had that big sound. After he left Lionel Hampton, he went with Count Basie, and then he joined Norman Grant's Jazz at Philharmonic. He was one of the first performers on Jazz at Philharmonic. He stayed with them for many years, and in the 80s, he formed his own big band. He had a big band that came here right at Kimball's. I went to see him quite a few nights. Matter of fact, one night I was there, he had a big band, and the Nicholas Brothers came in and danced. It was like, whoa, my goodness, this is extra bonus, you know, the Nicholas Brother running. Also, one night I was at the Keystone Corner, and it was around midnight, and Illinois Jacquette and Slam Stewart, the fine bassists who bows, they did a version of Around Midnight. Elmer Jackett was on bassoon, and Slam Stewart was on both bass, and they played that, a duet, around midnight. It was haunting, it was beautiful, you know. He continued with his band until he passed away. I think he had a degree at Dartmouth College. They gave him an honorary degree at Dartmouth College. Elmer Jackett. Eli Lucky Thompson. Where's Lucky from? Columbia, South Carolina, I think. Yeah. Lucky was out of Columbia. And came to New York. He joined Count Basie's band. A lot of these guys, they were, the big bands were the thing. There were no small units at that time, you know, because the New Orleans style jazz, unless you play Dixieland, but swing and big band jazz was in during the 20s and 30s. And Lucky Thompson came in, but Lucky was a transitional type figure. He played with Charlie Parker and Dizzy and them cats. He came out with Don Bias's style, but he had, how can I say it, a kind of whispery, like Ben Webster, and he could really play a ballad, beautiful. He was one of the first musicians, before Coltrane, to play soprano saxophone, and has one of the most beautiful tones on tenor saxophone. He went to Europe because he has a recording that he has, talks about all these promoters and record critics who he called parasites and vultures. So he went to Europe and stayed in Europe for many years, recorded over there. Then he came back to the States and moved to Seattle, Washington, and became a recluse. Nobody heard about him. He just gave up music and ended up dying in a senior assisted home there, just obscure, but one of the greatest tenor players that ever played tenor saxophone to me, Eli Lucky Thompson. How much time I got?
You got to go on.
Okay. This is a guy named Gene Ammons. I know y'all heard of Gene Ammons. Oh, goodness. He was, how can I say it, when I got into jazz in the 50s, he was the leading on Prestige Records. He sold more records than Sonny Rollins, Miles, any of them. People love Gene Ammons. He did a ballad, he's one of the best ballad players, My Foolish Heart, and it was, oh my goodness, matter of fact, went to the Billboard charts in the black community. It went that high. Gene's from Chicago. His father was a boogie-woogie pianist named Albert Ammons, who played with me, Lux Lewis, and Pete Johnson, all the cats. And he left Chicago, came to New York, and joined the Billy Eckstine Band, which was the first bebop band out at that time. He had Dexter Gordon in that band, Benny Green, Art Blakey, Fats Navarro. I mean, it was the incubator of bebop. It was the first band. Gene, how can I say it? They continued that tenor battle that Herschel Evans and Lester had done, and he and Dexter started doing tenor battles. They did a thing called Blowing the Blues Away, which was just a heavy thing that they did. Two tenor players just battling in and out. And it was friendly competition, that's how they called it. It was friendly competition, you know. But Gene Ammons. Now this is long, tall Dexter. Now all these tenor players, I think, pound for pound, he was one of the greatest. You know, he could do it all. He was 6'7", he was a tall man, and he was born in Los Angeles, went to school with Buddy Collette and Chico Hamilton and Charlie Mingus. They all went to school together. And his father was a doctor in Los Angeles, and his father was a doctor to Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton, all the black celebrities who come to Los Angeles. They would go see Mr. Gordon, Dr. Gordon. Dexter started off, he would go, he went to Los Angeles and started playing with Nat King Cole, and then Lionel Hampton heard him, and and took him to New York, and he joined that band with Ornette Cobb and took Jack Et's place, blowing Flying Home. And order to blow Flying Home, you had to blow it note for note, the same way Jack Et played it. You couldn't play it no different. That's how people wanted. They wanted Coltrane to do that on My Favorite Things, but Coltrane would never do that. You know, it's hard for a musician to copy himself over and over again. To me, that's not jazz. That's something else. You can call it something else. But Dexter, after he left, he went to Billy Eckstine's band, and then he joined, went with Miles, played with Miles and all the cats, and then he went to prison for a couple of times. He was in prison, and matter of fact, when he was in prison, he did a movie called, what was it called? Unchained or something. It was
Around midnight?
No, this was before that. It was him and Hampton Horse was in this movie about the penitentiary. Who was the football player played in it? I forgot his name. Huh? No, this is a white football player. Played with the Rams. I can't think of his name right now.
You can't remember all them facts.
Trouble my mind trying to think about that. But Dexter played in that, and then he, after he got out of prison, he decided to go to Europe with Ben Webster, all the cats over there, Ben and Bud Powell, and he went to Europe and started recording in Europe, playing at the Montmartre, Copenhagen, and all that. He came back to the States and he was a hit. He came to the Village Vanguard and was, he said, where's this cat been, Dexter Gordon? Because everybody was into Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and those cats. But Dexter had left and they had forgot all about it. He did a motion picture called Round Midnight, and he was nominated for the Academy Award for him playing himself. All he did was act like a jazz musician. He was that movie was based on the life of Lester Young and Bud Powell. He was trying to put both of them into this movie set, but Dexter Gordon. And I think, like I said, pound for pound, he's the bad cat. This is a picture of Dexter with his buddy. This is another tenor player that I failed to mention because he just there. His name is Wardell Gray. And this is a picture of them. They did an album called The Chase. And I think this was on the cover. It's like Dexter chasing Wardell. You know. That's what it was. You know. Two great tenor players. Dexter had a big sound. Wardell was more into what Lester Young was doing, had a light, more flowing, Sonny Stitt type sound. This is Sonny Stitt here. They called him the Lone Wolf because he didn't have a band. He would travel all over the country by himself with his horn, come to a city, and pick up a rhythm section. And I think the last time I seen him here, no, that wasn't the last. He was at Tiki Jack's with Smiley Winters, Ed Kelly, and I got the bass player. But he would come to town and pick up different musicians. He was phenomenal. I seen him at the Bears of that just before he went to Japan. He died right after that. But he was the kind of musician that don't bring your horn in the club. My friend, he had the audacity to bring a horn in the club, and Sonny Stitt called him up there. He said, come on up. And he got up there and kind of got embarrassed. He made me think of something. There's a video on YouTube. You got to check it out. It's Bill Cosby. It's some of the funniest shit I ever seen. Bill Cosby wanted to be a drummer, right? And he talks about how he wanted to be a drummer. He was so cool. He listened to the cast. He played behind the records, and he played this, you know. And one night he was at a showboat in Philly, and Sonny Stitt came in, and Sonny Stitt said, "Hey, stop playing this blues. We want to play some jazz." And Sonny Stitt called Cherokee, and Bill Cosby talks about how music hit up tempo, and Bill Cosby said rigor mortis set in his hands. He said he wanted his left hand to do some hip stuff. He said he couldn't do it. And he said he had been taking lessons at Rolex, so he said after he left the club, he went to Rolex and told the guy to give my money back. I mean, check this out on YouTube. Bill Cosby talks about Sonny Stitt. This is some of the funniest stuff I ever seen. I didn't know Bill Cosby was that funny. That cat is, woo. This is James Moody. I'm in the mood for love. There I go, there I go, there I go. Pretty lady, you are the soul who snaps my control. He did that, he recorded that in Paris. Moody went to service, and Dizzy Gillespie heard him in the service and told him when he come to New York and join his band. He joined Dizzy's band and played around for a while. Then he got strung out on that alcohol and stuff. And he had an uncle who was in the State Department and told him to come to Paris. So Moody went to Paris and did some recordings. He did I'm in the Mood for Love, but he called it Moody's Mood for Love. And it was so hip that Eddie Jefferson back here wrote words to that song. I mean, it was just, I remember my brother, he went to school, he graduated in '52. That was like the song that all the cats were trying to sing to the girls, you know. James Moody, also a great flute player, and just passed away about 5 years ago, but one of the great tenor players and alto and flute. New York, Eddie Lockjaw Davis, bad cat. Miles said when he got to New York, there was only a few cats that really knew this music, and he was one of them. One of his first gigs was with Coolie Williams. Coolie Williams had a band in the 40s with Eddie Cleanhead Vincent, the great Bud Powell on piano, and Eddie Lockjaw Davis. And they did a version of Is You Is or Is You Ain't My Baby, which was great. I mean, the stuff that Bud Powell plays in back of it is so hip, you know. It's just a blues, but Bud Powell was, he was phenomenal. This is Bill Evans. Well, his name was Bill Evans. It's Yusef Lateef, but that was his name. His father's name was Huddleston, but when he came to Detroit, he changed the family name to Evans. You know, probably a lot of blacks, when they came north, they would change their name because they didn't want nobody to trace them in the South. You know? So he became Bill Evans, and then in 1950, he became a Muslim, and Yusef Lateef played around Detroit, and he was one of the first musicians to play rural music before they gave him that title. This guy, I first heard him around 1957. My brother brought some records, Prayer to the East, and all these records where he would incorporate African instruments and flutes and stuff in his music. He did a beautiful thing, Love Theme for Spartacus on Prestige, where he played oboe, I think it's an oboe. But Yusef Lateef came to New York with a group and really didn't make it, but Cannonball Abbey hired him for his sextet, and they did the jive, samba, primitivo, a whole bunch of beautiful stuff. I used to go see him, and he would jump on Cannonball every night. This cat was a hell of a tenor player. One occasion, he went to, Sonny Rollins and Clifford Brown went to Detroit, and Sonny Rollins was the cat on tenor at that time, and he went to Detroit, and Yusef came and sat in with him, and they said Yusef cut Sonny Rollins up that time, you know. And it just showed you that they got guys in towns that are so bad, you come there with your ego on, you go there, wipe you down. That's how New York was. You come to New York thinking they got so many people in there that's so bad, you know. But Yusef just died last year. He was 93 years old. And he was one of the first flute players. And the critics say Roland Kirk was the first, but he was before Roland Kirk. The first to hum in his flute. At the same time while he's blowing, he would be blowing another kind of melody, put a song with his voice on the flute. Theodore Walter Rollins. Sonny Rollins, born in New York City. This guy was bad from the time he was about 14 years old. He grew up in Harlem, up on Sugar Hill with Jackie McLean, Art Taylor, and Kenny Drew, they had a teenage band that was formed in Harlem. He did his first recordings with Bud Powell when he was about 19 years old with Fats Navarro. Then he joined Miles' group, was with Miles. Miles wanted Sonny Rollins instead of Coltrane, but Sonny went with Max Roach and Clifford Brown, so Miles got Coltrane instead. But in 1956, they did an album together called Tenor Madness with Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, which was bad. I mean, hip stuff. I mean, yeah, it's hip. Sonny, matter of fact, he's one of the few guys up here that's still living. I think Sonny's about 85 or 86 years old now. And what's that?
He's 86.
86, that's what I figured. He was about 86 years old, and he's still playing. Great tenor player and composer. Mr. William John Coltrane, born in Hamlet, North Carolina. Came to Philadelphia as a young, folks brought him to Philly as a teenager. He went to school in Philly, went to the Navy, came out, joined Dizzy Gillespie's band, and played with Bird, Dizzy. And then in 1955, he joined the Miles Davis Quintet, which was one of the great quintets in jazz at that time, with Paul Chambers, Ray Garland, and Philly Joe Jones. But, how can I say it? He was the most spiritual tenor player I ever seen. I used to go see him and leave there like I got a dose of a reverend or something. Well, I'm not a big Christian though, but I know the feeling of music can give you a feeling that's, it's something, it's spiritual. Music is spiritual, religious. And Coltrane, he brought that out in music. He did my favorite things, and later he just went out to lunch. I couldn't stand him. Okay, I'm gonna just run Hank Mobley out of Eastern Georgia, but he was raised up in Newark, New Jersey, played with the Jazz Festival.